Hey folks, David Stewart here. Occasionally, I do get criticisms of how I do things on the channel or how I do videos, and I know it's hard to believe. And one that's pretty frequent that comes up is that I'm too political or there's too much politics like creeping into my videos. And I think this criticism is more directed towards my my review videos, my analysis videos of movies and books, not so much my expressly political videos like my sophistry videos. But I'd like to respond a little bit to that criticism, which I do acknowledge and I do accept that criticism. In fact, I'm going to give 5 points of response. The first one is, I am not apolitical and neither are you. For me to pretend that I don't have politics, I think is a little bit disingenuous, and to approach any particular situation by obscuring that I have some sort of political belief, I think is also a little bit disingenuous. I'm pretty upfront with who I am and what my political beliefs are, and they are part of me. They're part of me as a person. Most people would describe me as a libertarian or maybe a classical liberal if you were on the other side of the Atlantic, since the word liberal really means something other than liberal now in the United States, at least in like common political discourse. And because that's part of who I am, that determines a lot of my biases towards everything. Determines what sort of information gets through my filter, what information I seek out, what information I tend to ignore or just not even acknowledge because it's like white noise in my sort of information collecting zone. And so if I'm trying to pretend to be apolitical or pretend that I don't have politics, that's going to still present a biased view. So I might as well be upfront with it. The other thing is, you're not apolitical either. You have your own political perspective and your own biases, which are probably going to be different from mine, and that's okay. Everybody has a view of the world, like how it works, how it ought to work, like how the government fits in there, regardless of how they tend to view those things. No one's really apolitical. There's just people who have different amounts of wanting to engage with it. And that actually brings me to number 2, which is movies are not apolitical. Art's not apolitical, and nothing really exists in a vacuum. I would love to just be able to sit around and talk about stories and story writing and review movies and teach people how to play guitar and not have to talk about politics at all. But politics are in the art that we're looking at. They're in the movies. And if a movie is giving what I can see as an expressly political message, then I feel I ought to address that both in terms of the merits of its rhetoric or its arguments and in the merits of how it presents that within the movie and whether it fits within the context of the movie. And I've talked about that in a number of movies. So if the politics are in the movie, ignoring the politics is also a little bit of a disservice, right? You need to know about what kind of stuff is in the movies, and especially if you're a parent and considering showing a movie to your kids, whether or not you agree with my politics or not, you need to know that there's a message in there and be able to make a decision as to whether that is something that you want communicated to your kids and how you're going to respond to it, and all those sorts of important decisions that parents make day in and day out. And I said nothing really exists in a vacuum. We're all kind of part of this big grand social matrix that's within our culture. So how a movie responds to the elements of culture and how it portrays them, I feel is worth talking about, because that indicates a little bit of what the message is and also where the artist is coming from and what his possible intent is, and also possible failings and possible flaws with the movie based on the worldview, the politics, if you will, of an artist. So because art has politics in it, it's really not honest for me to ignore the politics, especially if it's giving a strong message that I disagree with. I feel inclined to give that other side, for sure. That brings me to point number 3, which is both sides are not equal. A lot of times you're going to meet people that are like the right's wrong and the left's wrong, and somewhere in the middle is like the correct position. I don't hold that belief. And because I'm not apolitical, I do try to present, both sides as I see them so that you can make the best decision you can. And I do try to present whatever argument the other side has as I interpret it, and not a straw man of that argument, especially if I have something that I think beats that argument. But I am not a person who pretends that both sides are correct. If I have a political stance, it's because I believe it's the correct one. And most of the things I believe, I have come to believe through like many years of experience in real life and philosophical inquiry and inquiry into reality, especially to sort of arrive at a set of conclusions. And my politics have actually changed a lot, especially since I was in the university system, which did affect my politics and did push me to the left. I've had many experiences that since then have pushed me to the right. So I don't believe like both sides are equal, and I actually think it's disingenuous to present both sides as being completely equal. I try to present, the counter arguments as they are, and whether they're strong or not, but I can't pretend that both sides are the same when I believe that they are not. I think that I respect people who are watching me too much to pretend to not have opinions that I actually have. And that brings me to point number 4, which is it's okay to disagree with me. I actually don't censor comments on my channel unless they're like trying to advertise or promote something. If you want to advertise on my channel, then you should go through AdSense because they're the ones who are brokering the ads for me, right? You should have a YouTube ad. So advertising on the channel, I usually don't allow. And I'll ban people if they say specifically that they want to be banned, which I know that sounds weird, but when someone comes out and says like, I'm unsubscribing from you, screw you, I'm like, okay, great. Then you don't mind that I ban you after I give a response because you don't want to be here anyway. So sometimes I make little things like that, but for the most part, I let pretty much even the nastiest comments through. I don't really delete comments that disagree with me. I don't really delete comments that call me poopy head or anything else. That's part of my whole philosophy of that. I believe if you want to come on and be a jerk, other people will kind of see that as it is. And, all the evidence is there that I don't really filter other people's opinions. And if you disagree with me, I usually let the comment through. And if I see it, I'll try to respond to it. Don't always get around to it. But it's okay to disagree with me. You can come to your own conclusions. I will not hate you for disagreeing with me. And just as a little bit of a tangent, right now there's a lot of fighting going on in regards to free speech. And before we can even have a debate as to what political position is correct, I want everyone to acknowledge that we need to be free to speak about it on whatever platform we're on. Censoring of political opinions is not something that I like to see, and there's a lot of corporate censorship going on with that. So I would like to see less of that so that I can actually have those discussions, because I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I want to be wrong because other people have convinced me, not because it's become untenable in a business sense or socially untenable to have a particular opinion, because it's not really changing someone's mind to silence them. In fact, it might actually harden them against you. And finally, the last one, number 5, which I probably have already addressed in the other 4. Politics cares about you even if you don't care about politics. Politics does affect you. The politics that are in movies are there to try to influence your thinking or change the way that you think, change your mind about something. And that could be good or bad, but it's there. And so because politics cares about you, to some extent you need to care about politics, even if it's to shield yourself from the effects of political discourse. And that's pretty much all that I have to say about that in regards to that. Politics are going to be in whatever I do because that's part of who I am. And I'm not going to try to change, deeply who I am. I've tried to be more neutral in the past. It doesn't always work out. So I try to present the other side as good as I can, but you guys know how I am. If I feel like politics are part of something that's going on, then politics needs to be something that I talk about, and hopefully you'll join me on that journey and provide me with the other side of things and the other opinion, which I will, of course, allow through on comments. You're free to make those comments that disagree with me, and I actually appreciate those. Believe it or not, I do spend a lot of time watching perspectives that are very different from my own, because you really only sharpen a razor with a stone. You sharpen a knife with a stone by grinding away the parts of the knife that are not sharp. So I take in a lot of other opinions that sometimes are very drastically different from mine because I'm just interested in seeing how those arguments are presented, who's presenting them, why the person who believes that might believe those things, how they, the rhetoric that they use to try to affect people is also of interest to me. So I take in a lot of other political opinions, and I promise I don't get too mad about them. You might see me answering kind if you open up with poopy head, but that's probably about it. Otherwise, I really appreciate other people's opinions, especially if you disagree with me, because there's usually, especially with art, there's usually more than one way to take something. So it's good to have a couple of different viewpoints in there. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm sure you already have subscribed at this point, and I'll be looking to deliver more good content for you in the future on anything that you want. So if there is something that you want me to talk about, tell me down below. I do have a big backlog of stuff, little issues that people would like me to talk about, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. But time's limited, so sometimes it takes me a while. Thanks, and you guys have a great day.